Make a start. There's plenty of seats in the front row. Thanks, Vince. We get the hecklers in the front. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. My name's Zuppa. I'm the Business Technology Manager at Austbrokers Countrywide. And welcome this morning to the Eastern Innovation Centre Business Centre for our Austbrokers Countrywide monthly seminar. Thank you for the team here for helping set up with Sheridan and Danielle, and everyone else here for joining us in person and for everyone watching online. Today our topic is about embracing technology and today and what's leading into the future. And we're going to go through some specific ones like artificial intelligence, blockchains, cloud computing, and how it impacts cyber security. We've got an expert panel here that'll go through each one of those things. And the whole goal is to just demyth and talk about some perceptions and what the reality is in these technologies, what some current applications are, and some real world examples. What can your business and yourself do with this information, and how can you embrace it as well in your own business? And what are the ideas that you might generate from this, and where do you see some opportunities? Our expert panel members are Scott Gunther from IG Firemark Ventures. He'll be presenting on artificial intelligence and blockchains. Michael Zuppa, General Manager at Blue Apache Systems. He'll be talking about cloud computing. And Jeff Wilson from Solar Turbines, he'll be talking about cybersecurity. Now, each of them will present their topics, and at the end of the panel discussion, at the end there'll be a little panel discussion, and after that we'll open up the room for some questions. So keep your questions to the end if you can, everyone. And so to kick us off, tell us a bit more about how the machines are going to take over the world. Scott.
Cheers, thanks, Dylan. There we go. Here's Philip's agenda, that's me. Where we get to? Here we go, that's us. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for allowing us to be part of this morning. And Dylan mentioned that we're actually going to have the AI component and the blockchain component. But first, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about who we are and why we're actually sort of here today. So I'm part of what is known as IG Firemark Ventures, and we're the corporate venture capital unit of IAG. And IAG, for those who are familiar, is Insurance Australia Group, which is the largest general insurer in Australia and New Zealand. And they sell consumer insurance, commercial insurance, and rural insurance to personals and individuals, but also to businesses. And they sell it through brands, as you might know, like NRMA, the RACV, CGU Insurance, Swan, WFI, and even Coles Insurance. So just give you a bit of a sense around who we are and why we're there. But we actually have a corporate venture capital unit, and we invest and partner with startups, and we do that to actually try and bring the outside world in. But when we invest and partner with startups, we do this for strategic reasons, not just like a VC unit does to try and get a financial return. We do this to try and actually get strategic benefit. And every time we invest or partner with a startup, we're looking to achieve one of these three goals. We're looking to access new sources of innovative customer data. And we want to access that new sources of customer data to help us better understand and service customers. So anytime we partner with a startup, we're thinking about the data that they may actually be able to help us unlock. The second goal we're trying to actually look to do is actually disrupt our own value chain. Everyone's talking about disruption and trying to actually take your business to the new level. We're really big about looking at our current business and actually identifying points of weakness, but also opportunities where we might be able to improve or enhance or differentiate. And the third one is create completely new business models. We're in a standard, pretty mundane, dry industry like insurance, and we know that we've got to move beyond insurance. So we're always looking at new ways to try and evolve. So that's why we partner and invest in startups. But if that's some of our goals, let's just think about traditional business goals together. Right? Now, these are pretty common across most organisations. We're all looking to try and do similar things. We're looking to attract customers. We're looking to convert customers once we've attracted them. And then once we've got those customers on our book, we're really focused about trying to retain customers. And then when we've got those customers, we're always trying to grow that customer share of wallet, right? Now they're pretty common, most organisations, not just in our space that we went through. before. But, you know, those generic goals, how do you sort of bring them to life? You know, most organisations will probably do 1 of 5 things to try and do that, you know, attract, convert, retain, and sort of grow. They might, you know, and try and improve their sales process, you know, they might improve their service model, they might try to actually get rid of operating costs, you know, they try and improve the customer experience or introduce new products or services. Pretty common, again, like the goals, you know, most people are trying to do all that sort of stuff, right, to try and actually make sure we survive. But what we like to sit there and say that we shouldn't be only trying to do this for our old factory, i.e. the business that we're working in right today. We should be looking at capabilities and technologies that actually should be helping you build a new factory of the future. So hence today, that's a little bit of background and context where we're going to start on our AI and blockchain journey. So on AI, or artificial intelligence, as we go. Now, AI is more than just a technology that actually underpins killer robots, but it is actually a pretty good example to actually get you through. Let's take a look at AI from a human lens, right? So if we go forward, that clicker seems to have frozen. I'll get you to maybe just progress the slide if you can for me over there. Let's just ask what actually is intelligence. And intelligence, if we go through again, I'll just give you a nod and go through. Here's a whole heap of human factors. That's probably why it's fallen apart. Here's a whole heap of human factors that you think about intelligence. At the top, you sort of see what we sort of see is a whole heap of sort of cognitive sort of factors. Now, these are not AI or technology. These are human factors when it comes to intelligence. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you're starting to see sort of perception things like, you know, vision and hearing. And on the right, you start to see more action-orientated sort of stuff. So like, you know, speaking and movement and manipulation. But let's go through and have a look. See something that's just highlighted in red. It's around learning, right? Let's just delve into that in a little bit more detail. So as we progress through, let's have a look at learning in a bit more detail. And again, we're taking this from the eyes of a human. Learning breaks down into 4 things. First thing we do when we learn is we actually look to actually memorize. Okay, we see something and we look to memorize it. Once we memorize it, we actually have the confidence to go and explore. And we actually want to go and learn more stuff, right? And actually explore more stuff. And then once we explore more stuff, we actually obviously memorize that. And we actually start to feel a little bit rewarded. You know, a little bit of self-satisfaction starts to come back through. And then we go back and repeat that whole process again. And that's how we actually learn, all the way from a child right through to, you know, later parts of our life. But if we go through and we see onto the next slide, how does this all come together? Well, intelligence is actually underpinned by learning, okay? And why that's important, because if you progress back through and we see where we go to now, this will actually help you when we move on to the next slide. You'll see how AI actually is just about intelligence underpinned by learning. So when you'll see hundreds of different definitions of AI, but our definition is that AI is the automation and expansion of all of those learning factors that we talked about before, all those intelligence factors that we talked about before, just the automation and expansion of it, all those automation and expansion of it. In the red, all those cognitive intelligence factors. In the yellow, all those perception intelligence factors. And in the green, all those action-orientated intelligence factors. So AI is the automation and expansion of cognition, perception, and action, okay? Right, so let's have a look forward and just explain this in a bit more detail. Let's see if we're any luck with the clicker. There we go. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail because we'll leave this back through with you later. There's a whole heap of, you know, different streams of AI. You hear things around what is machine learning, and you're hearing things about what's natural language processing and computer visionary and imagery and reasoning. It's all complex and technical sort of stuff, right? But I guess what we're trying to sit there and go back through is go back and use that example around intelligence and about learning. That's all what we're actually trying to do, but it's actually moving away from humans to actually getting machines to really do it. So if we progress back forward, I'm going to give you an example of a really good company who's actually putting some of this AI to life in their old factory today. All right, let's move through. We've got a couple of minutes to go. We're going to get through blockchain as well, right? So following on sort of that, you know, Terminator example we showed you earlier, right? You know, blockchain is more than just, you know, the technology that actually underpins things like Bitcoin, right? But it's a good example again as well. So I've got one last video to share with you. I can sit up here with all this technical crap up here, to be brutally honest, about Bitcoin. This is a wonderful little video that actually tries to debunk the myths that Dylan was sort of talking about a bit earlier. So what is Bitcoin? What is cryptocurrency? And what is blockchain? Let's take a look. There's a whole heap of examples there outside of this. Smart contracts, which you just saw in the villages. There's tokenization, which you use a lot in like peer-to-peer lending and insurance. You start to see blockchain can be used to eliminate counterfeit products. We see companies like De Beers actually use the blockchain to actually put the idea of every individual diamond they actually have. You see things like supply chain management. So companies like Walmart, actually, anybody can scan any item and they can see where it is, right from harvest all the way through it actually being purchased. You can see things like digital twins, where you actually have a physical asset like a wind turbine, right? And GE use this and actually have a twin, and it's a digital twin where they can use for testing, automation, simulation. And GE get about 20% efficiency by actually simulating through the digital environment before they do the physical environment. And I know we're going to talk about cyber a bit later on, but blockchain would be great for encrypted messages and security. So a couple little examples to go back through, but where I'll get last thing before we hand over, how do you get started with all this AI and blockchain sort of stuff? Because it's all pretty scary, right? We sit there and a lot of technology you need to understand. We're just trying to simplify it. Go back and think about your business goals that we talked about a bit earlier and how do you achieve those goals. And then specifically, if you want to actually know that you can do something in your business, just go and understand your own value chain. That's what we do. Where are your vulnerabilities? Where are your opportunities in your own business? Get a bit more educated on this stuff. The internet's a wonderful resource, right? And there's a lot of people available, so learn a bit more. Know the regulation ethics in your own industry, in your own business. That'll help you know where you can play and where you can't. And then just go and run an experiment. Get started. Probably the easiest way that you not only can fix your old factory and your handset, but it's also a way you can start building a new factory for the future. So thanks very much, and I think I'm handing over now to Michael.
Thanks, Scott. That was really, really interesting. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting world we live in today, and the ability to take advantage of these technologies to really disrupt the markets that we operate in, and really, yeah, just get that speed to market and speed to technology to be able to make these things actually happen. So I just want to thank you guys and ladies and gentlemen just for having me today, affording me the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about cloud computing, on what I think cloud computing is, my perspective, and what it means for organizations in Australia, small, medium and enterprise organizations, and just the advantages that it actually brings to the table. So my name is Michael Zuppa. I'm the General Manager of Technology at Blue Apache. So essentially I am responsible for the core vendor relationships that underpin our service pillars, and that's across networking, voice, secure workspaces, cloud technology, security, and then obviously our managed services that underpin all of those different streams. So just a quick one on Blue Apache. So Blue Apache has just celebrated its 20-year birthday, which is a big milestone for a technology company, especially here in Australia. So since 1998, Blue Apache has been delivering IT as a service to Australian organisations. Our real reason for being is to ensure that organisations have secure, efficient access to their core business systems all the time from anywhere. And that's really the mantra that we go to market with, and has served us well over the 20 years. So today, cloud computing is my topic. So hopefully at the end of this will be a bit demystified and you'll understand, because it is cloud does come in many forms. So I'll try to break those down and just show you the journey of how you get to the nirvana of where most organizations would like to get to. And then just to set the scene of what cloud is not, I've got a little video just to play, which is done by Kitty Flanagan on a show. You can watch the full video just to get a concept, but I've just taken a little snippet just to give you that perspective. So can you just But there was a recent study done by Forbes, and organizations today on average use at least 6 cloud platforms. Personally, I think that's a low number if I consider the customers that we support in Blue Apache. Even on a personal level, if we think about the cloud platforms that I make use of every day, Gmail, Netflix, my internet banking, my apps on my cell phone, on my smartphone, each one of those are connecting back into a SaaS platform. They're all feeding data, telemetry data into these platforms. So we're touching cloud every day through all of our interactions, and it's just getting more. So just a typical cloud deployment model. So I'm going to walk you through Blue Apache's vision of how we see cloud technology and the various forms of it. So typical deployment models, you'll hear you've got your public cloud, You have your private clouds and your hybrid clouds, which is a mix between the two. So public clouds are services that you can pay for on a subscription basis, where you have access to some form of service that's delivered from the likes of Google, Azure, AWS, those platforms, as well as a private entity. So a private cloud is more where it's delivered on technology, where you actually can see, feel, and know where the data center equipment is, and that's generally driven by certain compliance requirements. So some organizations would move more to the public cloud, where it's big data centers serviced by Microsoft Azure with most of their other partners, but you don't really have access or can't actually know or see where that data is. So it's either the far left, which is you're running it in your server room, or you're trying to get it to the far right, which is running it straight into the public services. It's really easy to get access to all of these platforms today. So types of clouds, aside from the public, private, and hybrid, is your traditional forms, which is called infrastructure as a service. So when you hear infrastructure as a service, think of it as getting access to a pool of resources, so compute, memory, storage, and this is where you're going to be running your application workloads. So you buy a pool of storage from some provider that's running it on shared infrastructure or dedicated infrastructure or the like, but it's provided to you as a service or on a consumption basis. Then you have platform as a service. Now Azure is really good in this space. They really came to market first. It wasn't really adopted at that point. They went more to infrastructure as a service, and now they're going back to platform as a service. So platform as a service is the easiest way to think about it. Will be your applications use a database. So before you would spin up a server, then you run that database on there, you have the software licensing for it, the maintenance, and you're updating this platform. With platform as a service and in Azure, you can just get an instance of that database. So meaning that Azure would run this huge platform that runs distributed database systems, so it's all protected, highly available, secure, encrypted, and all you're doing is pretty much subscribing to an instance on those platforms. So that's your platform as a service. A lot of other examples in that space would be like telephony. So a lot of hosted platform, voice platforms that's delivered as a platform as a service as well. And then the last one is software as a service. Now software as a service is Office 365, G Suite, those type of products, right? So it's not an actual platform component, it is more a subscription service that you're getting an outcome for. So if you're using Adobe or using any of those type of platforms, that's where software as a service sits. Now, when we've done talks with a bunch of CEOs and business organizations, and you go, if you had greenfields and you had to go and set up your corporation now and run IT, no one wants to run IT. That's not the core of your businesses. So where would the Nirvana state be? Is they would like to switch everything off, all the hardware, servers, the switches, environment in the organization, and move straight towards that software as a service area. So that's on the far outer ring of this circle. That is where you're just literally subscribing to something and you're getting instant value from that product. So you don't have that time delay of having to build, test, maintain, support. You can actually switch it on in a matter of minutes and start realizing the value of that technology. It's an easy way to budget and grow the business. It scales very easy. So as your business evolves and doubles in size, it's very linear with those operational subscriptions that you're paying for that area. But the main thing in this journey to cloud is, if we focus on the center of that, is the user. So it's that experience. At the end of the day, the user needs to access the application to perform something that your business is offering as value to your customers. So what you need to ensure is that user always has efficient, seamless access to their application, regardless of where it is. Whether it is in your servers, whether it's on cloud, infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, they don't care. It's the experience that matters for that user. Now that user has to connect to these environments. So that connection fabric is changing today. So because the environments are moving away from traditionally in your server room at the local site, and it's moving to these cloud platforms where you're not too sure where it is, those yellow boxes that are somewhere at Google and Apple, is how do you get connectivity to that? And this is where you would be looking at stuff like SD-WAN, your private MPLS networks, just general internet connectivity, but trying to look at partners that can provide access to peering networks, stuff where you're going to have the most seamless, fast experience, but also secured networks, so that you can, when you're accessing it through various browsers or devices, you know that it's being inspected and it's in a safe manner. So the connectivity area to these environments is changing quite a bit. If I move now into the wider circle, which is the cloud delivery, this is where your public cloud and private cloud sit. So the connectivity will connect you into these data centers. In Australia, there's a few main ones, but generally it's in Victoria and New South Wales. These are the main compute platforms where AWS and Azure reside, and also the likes of Blue Apache's Yellow Boxes reside there as well. So our cloud platforms are what would you call private cloud platforms. So it's where you know and can see the infrastructure that your workloads are running on. So we can show you exactly which disk and server and so forth is running. That can be dedicated physical, or it can be a shared resource pool. In those same data centers though is the access to those public cloud environments, which is your Google, Amazon and AWS. Sorry, Azure and AWS. These are the front runners, right? So these guys are taking the market. There's a lot of small private cloud environments on it, but just from the scale and the services and the speed to value of those applications that they're allowing customers to access, they're well and truly far market leaders in that space. So yeah, across all of these platforms, so regardless of where the user is connecting to these cloud platforms, one thing remains true, and this is the security and the accountability of the data. Because at the end of the day, the concern around organizations moving to a cloud platform was around security. They feel that it wasn't as secure, where it's truly the opposite, because these organizations are building multi-billion-dollar infrastructure environments in tier 4 data centers, meeting all of the highest industry compliance standards. So from a physical deployment maintenance point of view, it is far superior than any one of us could run in our own server room or data center. Aside from that though, securing the data still remains the responsibility of the organization and the individual, because they can just provide you the secure platform, but the data that you're putting in, the way you're accessing it, is still your responsibility. And that's why you'll see there's a wedge that goes across these platforms, which is really around the governance compliance, the security, single sign-on and identity access, and regardless of which cloud platform you need to use, that all still remains true. So it's ensuring that you have that security across each one of those environments, right? So it's still the responsibility of the organization. You can't outsource that accountability. So hopefully that sort of sets what cloud is. It does come in its various forms. So if I just want to recap on it, you've got your IaaS, your infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Those are delivered as private cloud platforms, public cloud platforms, or a hybrid of the two. So in today, regardless of where that is, it's the application. Application is the fuel. The data is the fuel that drives all of this. So when you're looking at blockchain, artificial intelligence, any of this technology, the data is what's driving it, right? So it is really the fuel. So today we're living in an ideas revolution. So it's where you can have a real idea and you can take it to market in a split of a second. By using these systems and softwares, you can have an organization that can go from $0 to $1 billion in a short time frame of maybe even 2 years. So if you take Uber, for example, it's about how do you change that end user experience? How do you change the way people interact with their day-to-day activity, and using data to be able to do that? Software service, cloud platforms allow these organizations to very quickly introduce new service offerings and expand that on massive scale. Our markets are going to be disrupted. If we're not having cloud-based strategies in our organization, or looking at our markets of how we let our customers interface with us, what's the experience of them dealing with us? How do we employ artificial intelligence to drive smarter analytics or patterns within our business, or blockchain, trying to look at how we can take advantage of that technology. It isn't an ideas revolution, and all markets are going to be disrupted. Just to hit that one off, I've just been called the time. I've just got 2 quotes just to leave you guys with. This one is from Gartner. So cloud itself was a disruption. It's not a disruption anymore, it was a disruption, right? Today it serves as the foundation for other disruptive trends, including the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and the digital business. So we need to get away from thinking of a cloud strategy. That was yesterday. We need to be moving forward. And just one that I created myself for today, organizations need to evolve themselves. You need to structure for agility. You need to disrupt, or you're going to be disrupted. Thank you for your time. I hope that cleared it up a little bit.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for Scott and Michael talking about very, I guess, very interesting and upcoming technology. And to lighten the mood a bit, we'll get Jeff to talk about cybersecurity.
Thanks, Dylan. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'll try and keep this as high level and as non-technical as possible. But just want to give an overview of, from a cyber security perspective, or just a security full stop perspective, what we're trying to achieve when we're thinking about security. So my name is Jeff Wilson. I'm a regional connectivity engineer for Solar Turbines. We're a fully owned subsidiary of Caterpillar, and we do industrial gas turbines for mostly customers like Woodside, BHP and Esso. So I spend a lot of my time offshore on oil rigs connecting up our turbines to do data analytics and traversing our data from our turbines that our turbines are generating across the customer network. So we have a lot of security requirements we need to meet to do what we need to do through our customer network. So, is this working or not? No. All right. So I asked Dylan, what does a hacker look like? I said, well, just type in hacker to Google image search and you'll see if you own a black hoodie, you can be a hacker. But you've got to have green text on your computer screen, and that's it. It's all you need to be a hacker. Who's seen Mr. Robot? Not that many, okay. Mr. Robot's probably the most accurate kind of show that's ever created. Maybe War Games as well, that's pretty accurate for the day. But yeah, Mr. Robot, they've got some great consultants on there which tell them how to do it. So just an idea of what we're dealing with. Next slide, please. So yeah, we'll just go through about InfoSec 101, basically what it is, how to kind of do it, I guess, but from a very high level. Like the nitty-gritty detail, you kind of need an expert to be able to kind of help. But things you need to think about at a high level, board level, or management level to make sure that you're protecting your data and your digital assets. Next slide. Risk. So basically it all comes down to risk. So just to go walking in the street involves risk. To drive your car involves risk. To use technology, there's risk involved with that. Depending on who you are, that risk can be different. If you're, say, keeping state secrets or running an election in the United States, your risk profile is a hell of a lot bigger than if you're shipping out widgets from your factory in Clayton. So you need to be aware, based off that, how much you need to invest in mitigating those risks. Because you might have you're not going to have a nation state trying to get to your widget manufacturing facility and spending heaps of time and effort to get to your manufacturing facility. You might have an opportunistic hacker putting ransomware, or you might just click a link that's been blasted out to every person on the internet, and you might end up with ransomware on your computer and you can't use any of your computers, so you can't manufacture your widgets. So, or you might be collateral damage. In the case of, say, NotPetya, was a little ransomware hidden, it was disguised as ransomware, but it was actually just a tool which sort of, I don't want to say attribute it to the Russians, but most likely it was the Russians aimed at taking down a lot of computers in Ukraine. But Maersk, the large global shipping company, got caught in the crossfire and they lost pretty much all their computers. everything got wiped. Wiped completely. It shut them down. They couldn't ship. All the computers that did all the manifesting and any computer in the organisation got wiped. One thing saved them. There was a power outage in Africa, in one of their African offices, and that enabled them to restore their domain configuration and get back online quicker than what they would have. They would have had to rebuild from scratch. And that wasn't even targeted then. That was just an accidental thing. So, next slide, please. What can we do to manage our risk? We can put in controls. So, I might just skip to the next slide as well. Basically, so I spend a lot of time on oil rigs, as I said. There's a massive safety culture. So I have this idea that this is the hierarchy of control. There's lots of gases, lots of hazardous things. What can you do to mitigate the risks out there? The biggest and most easiest step to get rid of it is to eliminate it. So if you've got a Windows 98 computer, don't plug it straight into the internet. Make sure you've got firewalls, or don't even use it. Try and find another way to do it. Or substitution as well. Substitution is another thing. So instead of saying using one tool, so in a safety perspective, say if you're using a big heavy tool, find something that's easy. Use a drill. Use something that's easier. Engineering, you can engineer a control out. Administrative controls, so how you do things, your process, the order in which you do it, and like a permit system, or PPE, which is always the last thing. So you put gloves on. So you put gloves on to type in. Not going to help you. Next slide, please. This is what I thought. I just came up with this on the flight thinking, you're right, that's a good analogy. So the top thing is actually have it in the front of mind when you're using technology. This is a risk. You know, I need to be aware of what things could come and bite me potentially by using this. The next layer down is you want to dedicate some time to training your staff and making sure they're aware of the risks and how to spot them, how to spot a spam virus, or spam email, how to spot a phishing attempt. So they know what to do. Enable your staff. Because if they don't know, they'll just click willy-nilly. It does take time and it does take effort, and unfortunately, they're getting better and better. The phishing emails get better and better. They look more like the bank emails. They take the image. The language in them is getting better. That's always been a dead giveaway. Dear sir, please, I attach to you the finest, you know, the Nigerian prince example. Focus on the fundamentals. So now we're getting down into more the technical side. So focus on making sure your operating systems are patched. Everything you've got's up to date. You haven't got anything there that shouldn't be there in your environment. So it's more the physical doing and making sure that you are secure by doing the basics. Your passwords are good. People understand not to click on emails. You've got firewalls, you've got spam filtering, you've got all that kind of stuff. And prevention, again, if it doesn't need to be there, get it out. Detection and response. So I hate statistics. I hate numbers because, especially statistics about information security breaches, because there's so many people that one wouldn't report, or they over-report, or they under-report. So I don't actually like statistics, but statistics in terms of information technology security breaches, I think half of them are made up. I think there's a statistic that 73% of statistics are made up. I think that's true. But there's a lot of, so there's one statistic that says there's probably about 70% of breaches don't get detected until 60 days after the event. So a network's been infected, it had a virus go through, or there's hackers in the network, and it's not until 60 days or more after the fact that they realise they've been infected. So detection and response is like the minimal thing, and then anything else below that, you're insured for. So if you can't put a control in to any of those other controls, then you've got to insure against those risks to mitigate them. So you get financial compensation if something does happen. Next slide. So then it comes down to the costs. And as I was saying before, depending on your risk profile, that will dictate how much you need to spend. So my brother works for Lockheed Martin. They're doing airplanes, F-22 Raptor, all that kind of stuff. Their risk profile is massive. The Chinese want to get in there. They want to get their stuff. Whereas if you're just, you know, making brake pads in Clayton, I don't know why I keep saying Clayton, but it's close by, it's right here, so yeah. Your risk profile is not going to be as high, so you probably don't need to invest in the latest and greatest. You just need to do the basics, and that'll mitigate 98% of your risks. So cost is always a factor. And even if you do spend millions and millions of dollars on your information security program, there's still holes there. The biggest thing is often human error. You know, it's people and processes that generally think. So generally cause, open up the gap for attackers to get in. Or not even attackers, not even targeted attacker, as I was saying, just an opportunistic attack. Next slide, please. So the basics of information security, there's three things you're trying to protect, which is the CIA. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Next slide, thanks. So confidentiality. Basically what you want to try and do is keep your secrets secret. You want to keep your credit card number secure. You want to keep your medical information secure. And also your bank logins. So how do we do that? Use cryptography. Basically anytime you see the little padlock, it means you're in your browser. There's debate as to really how effective that is. It means that any data between you and that server is encrypted. But it doesn't validate that server is definitely who you think it is. It doesn't validate that. You could have it spelt slightly differently. And these days with SSL certificates being free, so the barrier to entry to get one of those locks is zero. It doesn't cost you anything now. You can secure your website with a click of a button. Let's Encrypt is a service that's been spun up in the last 2 years, which makes it really easy to get free SSL certificates. So just looking for the lock doesn't guarantee that the site's secure. If you click on a link in an email, it could take you to a secure site, but it might be Microsoft with M1SCROFT. You know, it could be spelt slightly differently and still have the lock. So you just got to be aware of that. There's a little bit, never click the links. Always use a bookmark or always type in the addresses in your browser. Next slide, thanks. Integrity. So integrity we're trying to protect. It's basically honesty. You want to know what is there actually there. Does that make sense? Blockchain is actually a form of integrity. You know, you're using cryptography to assure that the transactions that occurred are what they are. There hasn't been a malicious actor in the middle modifying one or the other things. Your data is what you expect it to be. So it's not like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where the guy gets in and changes his dates, how many days he was sick. You know, goes from 9 to 8 to 7, right in front of the secretary's eyes there. That's about it for integrity. And next slide, thanks. Availability. So availability is kind of the big one. Are your resources available for you to use when you need them? Ransomware is probably a big one. If you're not protecting against ransomware, you get a ransomware attack, your computer's unavailable. If you've got someone doing a denial of service attack on your website, it's unavailable. Going back to the cloud thing, I just wanted to say something about Ticketmaster, or Ticketek, sorry, it was Ticketek. You're trying to buy a ticket for the grand final, it's not available. It's not security per se, but it's something still you need to think about. It's not available. It's not a malicious attack. They haven't planned enough and they haven't used a service like Azure or AWS so they can automatically scale their services. They've probably just got one server, they're doing it on the cheap and everyone hits it at once and it just goes up in flames. So you need to make sure you've got backups. You need to be aware of things like ransomware and distributed denial of services. And there are mitigations for that as well, things like Cloudflare and tools that you can put in front of your websites and online presences, maybe not websites, just applications, to protect them from malicious attacks. Because they can also be like a ransom. Pay us 500 Bitcoin or $500,000 or we'll make sure your site doesn't come online. And it costs them nothing. And you can pay there's services out there on the internet, on the dark web. We haven't got into that one at all, have we? On the dark web that, you can pay $20, $25 and they'll just take a website down. They'll just use a botnet of computers or hacked routers and just direct traffic at it, and there's so much traffic that the site can't handle it, the service can't handle it. Next slide, thanks. So 7 tips to fight cyber crime.
Oh, these are my tips.
These are Dilip's tips. So I had a few other things in there as well, basically what to do. So just try and do the basics. Make sure your passwords are up to scratch. Make sure you have, you've thought about it. Just think about the risk. What can happen? What's the worst case scenario that can happen? And just try and plan around that.
Can I just ask a question about bookmarks? Because if you use bookmark, it eliminates people from the other side of the world seeing you keying in your password.
Mm-hmm.
So they're actually a good security thing, are they?
Absolutely.
Because I was actually told by a friend not to use bookmark. But if I do bookmark my banking, that's quite a safety shield.
It gives you an insurance.
Well, it wouldn't be 100%, but better than having to key in all the time.
Never 100%.
Well, that's very interesting.
In theory, an attacker could get in there and modify all your bookmarks to go to their site.
Right.
In theory.
And also,
but the likelihood of that happening is very low.
Okay. So bookmark I should do with regular sites. Like banking.
I would always suggest using a bookmark over clicking a link in an email.
Right, okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I lost $6,000 on ANZ banking recently, and then ANZ recommended I installed a McPhee, which they use as well. So I'm feeling a bit safer now, but and then they reimbursed us.
Yeah. Well, most of those cases, the banks will take a liability for any financial loss regarding your, transaction accounts or credit cards. Even the banks will wear that. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. If I could just add onto that one, with the bookmarks and the device, right? So if you bookmarking something to automatically enter your credentials and so forth on a website, you need to ensure that the device is safe, because if someone gets your device, they are then you, and they can just open up any one of your bookmarks and go straight into your internet banking. Okay. So really look for stuff like two-factor authentication, ensuring that there's a second form of authentication to validate that you are who you say you are, and it's outside of the device that you're logging onto. So for example, you log onto your banking website and it will send you an SMS code, which you have to key in before it will actually allow you in. So that way you're getting two forms of authentication.
So can that be arranged with the bank?
Absolutely. And a lot of them as well, the banks can do is an SMS authentication to if you're transferring over a certain threshold. So if you're transferring over, I think it's $500 with my bank, they'll send you a text message. Same as logging into the MyGov site or any of the government digital assets. You either have to have the Authenticator app, which has a rolling code every minute, the code will change, or you get a text message. So that gives you the extra layer of authentication, which is more security. So just on that as well, the top one there, using a password vault like Dashlane, that can also save your bookmarks within that, as well as saving your usernames and passwords inside that.
Sorry, what was that? I missed that, sorry.
So the top tip here to secure, to help fight cybercrime, or to keep yourself safe online, is use a password manager. Okay. And often the password managers can also integrate, so you've got a one-stop shop, they can integrate those authentication codes. So you've got one app to store your usernames and passwords and keep that authentication code. They also use encryption to ensure your usernames and passwords are safe, and you can also have it, they're really good because they can actually say, right, you're using the same password across every website. That's bad. If one of those websites gets breached and your username and password credentials go into the wild, then they can try and use that username and password or email address and password against every other site. And so once they're in one, they're in all. So your Gmail, your iCloud, and your Microsoft are all the same, then, they're the things I care about. I don't care if they get into my Netflix, but if they get into my Gmail and they get into my iCloud, then, So I'll sit down and we'll just take some normal questions, I guess. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks everyone for really scaring the bejesus out of me. With some automated robots.
That was the non-scary version.
But there is some, like what Michael was saying, there's a lot of upside to a lot of the technology that is up and coming, and one of the biggest things I've taken out of what Michael was saying is being able to start a business and being able to scale quickly, as opposed to in the past where you needed to take technology and operating costs as a big capital expense before you start anything. But now with the Internet of Things and where cloud computing is, you can actually start up relatively quickly and have a viable product running and making money pretty quickly. Just in terms of the top of a panel discussion, so the first one I had was around, Michael, how do you see cybercrime coming into the place of cloud computing, and what are the cloud providers doing to help prevent or safeguard against cybercrime?
Yep. Good question. That's actually two sides, right? Because while the cloud benefits us to be able to get access to cost-effective resourcing to run our applications, it also gives the criminals access to cost-effective compute, which can scale and denial of service attack.
Denial of service, or they've got a list of encrypted passwords. They can use that massive computing power of the cloud to try and decrypt those passwords, or decrypt anything really, anything that's encrypted historically.
Definitely. So there's two sides, and that's where we need to look at security in terms of leveraging best-of-breed technologies, like you're saying, where you can have your Cloudflares and so forth. But looking at your cloud providers that are offering the service, make sure that their credentials are right. Check their security. Like, you trust in them with your data and running of your data, ensure that they have the right processes and controls and risk mitigations themselves for yourself. So again, with starting up with the businesses and so forth, access to these technologies are affordable and it's scalable, and you pay for what you need when you need it. So that's the thing. Really, the days of building up your own infrastructure and trying to secure your own infrastructure, that's a losing battle.
So what are you saying that?
Yeah, I think it's very scary. I get very scared when I think about if someone ever got the keys to Azure. You think about all the assets. People don't even know. You don't even know. Like, it's transparent to the end user what these services are running in the background on. So, but the vast majority would be either running on Azure or AWS. So large web services, any kind of service you use, Dropbox, they all use, all the banks, they all use some kind of cloud-based platform at some point in the chain. So if they were ever to be compromised from top to bottom, that really gives me chills. But they haven't been yet. So you kind of, or you don't know about it. That's the other thing. They haven't been yet, or you just don't know about it. And most of the time they would get compromised, it would be from someone leaking credentials. But again, they're secured. If it's worthwhile, if it's a valuable digital asset, you're going to have two-factor authentication.
So Scott, how do you see with things like artificial intelligence coming into this place? Like, I'm just picturing a robot being installed in the cloud now and being able to help a cyber criminal start hacking websites automatically. Is that something that could happen, or how do you see that happening in the artificial intelligence space?
Yeah, I'll answer the cyber piece of it, right? Let's be honest. There's always people that are actually out there who are crooks, right? Let's just understand that, and whether they are the Ruskies with the hoodies or
they've all got hoodies.
They've all got hoodies, right? you got to sort of accept that part. And I think getting over that part is there is always that, which you called out before. I think it's risk, right? So the risk is always present. I think acknowledging that's a really important part of it. So yeah, will there be people out there doing it? Absolutely, of course there always will be. But I think if you also recognise then there is good in people. Everybody wakes up every day with I'm going to go to work and I'm going to do something that's positive to achieve an outcome. I think it outweighs some of those, the Ruskies that are actually there. So our feedback is, very much look to explore in that artificial intelligence space as we sort of talked about, but do so, I think Jeff's point, with caution. You just can't necessarily just go and put like the examples that we showed out there in your business straight away and expect all your customers to love it and expect all your customers to use it. It's going to be, very much who likes to use it, right? So, but it's important to explore and test it out, but do so knowing that there is an element of risk. And if there is an element of risk before you go and speak to somebody. get a little bit more educated about it, okay? Find out what some of the regulatory requirements are, what are some of the ethical items, what are some of the, tips and, the 7 things you got there. There are plenty of people out there that can sort of help you. So that's how we look at it.
Can I just go on that as well? If you're looking at deploying new technology, it's cheaper and easier to do that thinking about securing it up front at the start. It's going to save you a hell of a lot more time and a hell of a lot more money to think about how secure this needs to be before you start developing, before you write a line of code. As opposed to retrofitting security, that's where it takes time and money to do that kind of stuff. Census is a good example.
So, Michael, we talked about cloud computing as well, and how do you see where blockchains are coming into, where we talked about decentralizing of information rather than centralizing information? If you talk about the last 10 years, where cloud computing has helped bring all data together in a cloud environment, so centralizing, how do you see blockchains, disrupting that environment?
Yeah. I don't see it disrupting the environment. I see it actually complementing that environment. So blockchain is about the distributed ledger, and again, the ease of access to compute around the world globally. So you can essentially create your own distributed ledger yourself by having compute zones across the world that is validating that transaction. The driving beast behind blockchains is computational cycles. It needs power, it needs compute, and it needs to be able to write those chains and solve those algorithms. So the big data centers, the cloud computing is what makes those technologies work. Because otherwise, yes, it will be all on PC devices, but then once someone has a much powerful device, they have more to compute power, they have the influence of which way that technology goes. So I do see cloud driving that, because while it's decentralized, there is still some form of centralization in those technologies, and at the like of Azure. So you can go and take blockchain services off Azure now, because they have 140 odd data centers. You can create a pretty distributed ledger-based system already.
So how do you come back on that, Scott?
Yeah, I think that the cloud computing part, you made a really interesting call for Michael. I think the strategy piece was yesterday, and now we're actually in execution mode. And if you haven't sort of start to get your business cloud enabled, you are probably a little bit behind. So I agree with what sort of Michael's sentiments on that part. I think the blockchain piece is still very emerging. It's a great concept. It's got great technology. I gave a couple of use cases, right? One of them was looks like a Western American Amish village, that we sort of showed, right? That's sort of that. There is still a long way to go before, I guess, blockchain goes to really sort of take on. So I think what you're starting to get to is that maybe it's a little bit back to that point that your cloud strategy was a bit yesterday, and now you're sort of in cloud enablement. Maybe where blockchain's really starting to see, it's that right on that edge part right now. It's becoming emerging. It's starting to be something you should be thinking about. Don't necessarily have to go and race out and deploy it on everything right now, but you probably want to catch the bus pretty early now and not be 3-5 years down the track and go, what's this all actually about? So I think maybe Mike's right. They're probably complementary.
So other than cryptocurrencies,
yep,
what is a potential killer app for blockchain? What's going to hit the mass market?
Yeah, I think you look at it, the smart contracts is the biggest one. Yeah. So the ability for me to actually bypass, you saw that, that central organization that's actually there. And it's interesting because they had a bit of a cyber attack, or associated cyber attack. It was a industry or a company called PEXA, if anybody knows. It was a property exchange Australia, right? But that smart contract part where you're essentially buying and selling property is a really good example. You used to have a middleman in the middle, so there was my conveyancer, your conveyancer, there was a bank and so forth. It was all done through sort of paperwork. I think that's a really, really important use case to go back through a smart contract. Yeah. And I'll give you a good example about a smart contract. It's just like when you walk up to a vending machine, right? So you think about how a smart contract works. It's between you and an individual. So I sit there and go, okay, I'll go to the vending machine and I actually identify in the vending machine, I want that. And then what I end up doing is I put some money into the vending machine, right? And the vending machine is going to turn around and say, is it enough money or not, right? So that's sort of how that contracts work. They're going to say, no, you need to put more money in. And once they've got the right amount of money, they're going to turn around and say, right, I'll release that product, and you drop it into the bottom and I pick it up and I take it. I mean, it's a really simple example, but that's like a a one-to-one sort of example of like a smart contract. And I think you're going to start to see more and more of those that'll start to go through in its earlier use cases, I think.
And it's also about, is it being able to commerce and buy and sell without trust as well? Like that's a big part of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that you would sit there and go that the trust is actually already built in if we're into that sort of, and you know, you don't have that extra threat that there's somebody else in the middle that's overseeing everything you're doing. So, yeah, but I think that's possibly where maybe that smart contracts is probably going to be where there'll be more and more uses of blockchain in that sort of next horizon. Yeah.
Is the conveyancing side of that, purchasing that property like that, is that all done in one step somehow, is it?
Yeah, so the government made some changes a few years ago around legislation around putting in an electronic platform that would actually allow us, because if you thought about it, it was a very manual, very linear type sort of approach. So there is now a government-run entity known as PEXA, which is Property Exchange Australia, which allows all the different entities to sort of play in that sort of space. So it's moving towards that sort of as a model, if that kind of makes sense, yeah. But the PEXA platform is still the man in the middle, right? They're still that intermediary. Eventually, I should be able to buy and sell property, just you and I, right? And we should be able to enter into a transaction together, and everybody else can be out.
All those, so I've just got this analytical. There's a lot of detail involved in exchanging properties, so you're simplifying it a lot. But anyway, I appreciate what you say.
Yeah.
You'd obviously well ahead of me.
You'd always get expert assistance, but instead of having a middleman, you know, like with the PEXA example, there was real estate agents, conveyancers and lawyers involved, and the instance that happened, it was a couple of months ago, it made the news, the MasterChef contestant who lost the last part of the transfer. So what happened in that instance, the attackers got in at just a very fine point in time, just changed the bank details. That's the integrity. They lost integrity there. The bank details they're expecting the transfer to go to, instead of going to the vendor, went to the attacker, and it's gone. So you're removing that opportunity, you're removing that threat vector, but you'd always get that level of professional knowledge and understanding between those two parties.
Yeah. This is where I reckon the blockchain can help out, because it'll lock that piece of information that it can't be changed. Yeah. So if that was done in a peer-to-peer instance rather than a central authority, where it's a transaction between, say, myself and Jeff, I put in some information, it can't be changed. That then also helps Jeff know that I need to transfer that money to this person. This is bank account details, and it can't be changed. That's sort of those type of things are where blockchains are going to come in. And using cloud computing also, we know that those layers are going to be secure as well.
It's all about the transparency.
To get into Bitcoin, isn't it? Good time to get into Bitcoin.
Buy up, buy big.
Yeah, sorry, Mark?
Yeah, look, my understanding, one of the barriers with blockchain is the cost because of the computing power required. What are some of the ways that you see that being overcome going forward and opening up to a much more viable method of securing transactions, etc.?
I don't know, who'd want to take that question?
I'll go through it. I think the best way to look at that is that you actually see that the amount of startups that are actually building blockchain capability and technology, it's actually the fastest growing, and it's ahead of cybersecurity. Whether you actually get a chance, you know, and you see what's happening in Silicon Valley and San Francisco to, you know, into Tel Aviv and Israel and places in London, like every single startup has got some form of blockchain technology. So whilst the barriers to entry traditionally are quite high, at the moment the growth in volume is making it a very, very affordable area to start getting into. So if I was to be an organisation of IAG's size, guess what? Yeah, it would take time and money and resource, and it's going to take a long time. But if I was to use a smaller company and a startup, it could actually be a lot easier. And I would suggest, Mark, that maybe that also helps smaller businesses actually could get ahead of the corporates as well, right? Because they could actually engage with these smaller sort of startups to get going. So high at the moment, but definitely on the way down.
Yeah. So just to clarify that, so the blockchain still requires multiple computer. So how does a startup
I'll
facilitate that?
I can expand.
I was going to say, sorry,
Yeah.
I've read that high-end video graphics cards are what people are buying to help boost their processing power. Is that right?
Yeah. And that's because there's so many different variations of blockchain, right? So there's the smart contracts, there's currency versions of it, but it all does require compute power. And if you look at the drive behind it was around getting that cryptocurrency, and in order to get that cryptocurrency, you needed to do a lot of compute cycles to earn that dollar. So when you look at the cost of actually getting involved in that type of Bitcoin is where a lot of that cost is getting driven, is very high. Because in order for you to compete against the guys that are building data centers, running megawatts of power and a lot of compute, crunching all of this Bitcoin technology or crypto mining technology, there's revenue on the back of it, and it is a big high barrier to entry. Because when you think about it, the Bitcoin, or when you're doing smart ledger, is a distributed, uncentralized copy of a ledger. So if you're using something that becomes really globalized and big, I can't hold a copy of that ledger on this device or on my servers in my room or even in my office, because it becomes too big. So you do need these massive data centers to be able to keep that moving in a fashion where you can actually still make use of it. Because otherwise what happens is it just grows and it gets to a halt because it takes too long for something to actually happen. So it is a still very young market. Where I do see it taking off will be around industry segments. So say, for example, all insurance companies went onto one centralized. It's distributed, but it's still centralized because it's controlled by the industry, the insurance industry, where they're all using one ledger-based system. Costs are shared and so forth, but then it's all transparent and it's all on one system. That's where I think it will take off. Otherwise, there's still centralization involved in it for it to scale, to do something.
There's a bit of crystal balling there as well, Mark, I think, where I think a lot of these blockchain companies are expecting that computation will get faster as time goes on. And also, there's also the advent of quantum computing that people are talking about that says in the future, whether it's near or far, that things will be 10 times or 1,000 times faster to do rather than it is now. So in the advent of quantum computing, let's say that's the technology, quantum computing is just a faster computer. And when that happens, those type of scale issues also get managed or handled.
The risk about cybersecurity is from two sides. One is from our side, and the other part is from inside. So how can I cost effectively to detect inside risk and mitigate that?
Yeah. Really good, but understand your access controls and your auditing logic. So you can say, all right, role-based access controls. As you said before, crooks are crooks. There's always going to be crooks out there. So if it's someone's job to transfer money all day, then you have to give them the level of access they need to be able to transfer money. And then you're going to have to trust them to be able to do that job and not be malicious about it and transfer money where it shouldn't go. Other than that, you can put in access controls to say, all right, these areas of the business you shouldn't have access to. I don't want you looking in, this folder here or that folder there, instead of just having it open slather.
Yeah, but the risk is really come from that part. Is like the person, I have to give the permission for them to do that.
Yep.
But like nowadays, they think my salary is not high enough, and the competitors is giving them something they want to get more money, and then my information and everything is gone.
It's very hard, especially in terms of insider threats and leaking, trade secrets and things like that. It's especially if there's financial incentive for them. it's very hard. And it's easier in these days as well with digital technology to just slip a USB key and copy stuff over and out it goes. I mean, you can look at setting policies to disable access to USB devices. There are tools out there you can use that kind of stuff and say, right, no USB devices, because the threat that it introduces by using USB, either copying data out or bringing viruses and infections, malware in, is greater than the benefit you get from using USBs. And so you push people more to use cloud services, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, all that kind of stuff. Use that as a method of transferring files. And you can also put tools in place above that to monitor what's going in and out. So DLP, data leak prevention, it's called. So you can monitor the files coming in and out. Again, it's not the cheapest stuff and it's not the easiest stuff to implement, but the tools are there to be able to do it.
We're finding these type of tools are also becoming more cost effective over time. So all these firewalls and that were started off being local to your as a little machine. Now these services are all available on the cloud, and you can start buying them, and they are, in my view, becoming a lot cheaper as well. So it's not a you don't have to be a big company to having access to the level of security that I think a business these days do need.
I'll just expand on that one just quickly as we go to the next question. It's really around that identity, right? Because the person you are entrusting with them to have access to something. So always assume that the credential is compromised, because that's the easiest thing. Most of the breaches and everything happens is it's done by credential. So assume that the person is compromised. So that's then insider. So use cost-effective tools like Office 365, Azure AD, and so forth, because that actually can start doing behavioral analytics based on a user. So you do certain things throughout the day, it knows and profiles you as that user. As soon as you start doing any actions that deviate from that norm, it will fire off alarms. But it will also start doing conditional-based access. So meaning that you access from a specific device on a daily basis, all of a sudden you're using a different device or from a different location. That's a problem. These are cost-effective solutions to put in place, and it's all around the identity. So always look at strong passwords, two-factor authentication, and identity, because that is what gives you access to all of those platforms.
Sorry, a question.
Yeah, so I do use LastPass for my passwords, but I feel quite uncomfortable with that because I've got one password to get in there.
Yes.
Someone gets hold of that. There's no two-factor authentication that I'm aware of.
You can turn it on. So yeah, you can turn it on the authenticator. So I mean, I use LastPass myself. So have another app which has a rolling code, and you can set the time limit for that to. If you've got your username and password saved on your device, which on my iPhone I do because it's protected by a biometric. So to open LastPass on my phone, I've got to put my thumbprint on it. But every 30 days, it still asks me for my authenticator code. So you can do that.
We'll take one more question. I think anyone has any more questions?
I've got one little question. Using a banking app, is that more secure than going online?
Yeah, I would say yes. I would say yes because they've developed that whole stack. Whereas if you're using a browser, you're at the whim of the browser manufacturers, and you could have a strange plugin which is doing weird stuff within your browser, your Firefox, your Chrome, or your Internet Explorer, or your Edge, or Opera, whichever browser you're using. There could be something malicious in there monitoring it. So I would say yes. Yeah.
As long as you secure the device. You have to secure the device.
Yes. Don't leave it unlocked.
So use biometrics, use face recognition, finger thumbprints, those type of things.
Yeah,
If you're just using a PIN, it doesn't matter if you're using an app or a browser. Once someone is on the phone, they are you.
Yeah, and make sure your device is locked. Make sure you have something on your device that it locks. Yeah. Don't have it just swipe and open. Make sure you put a pin on your device.
Don't tell
because effectively that's becoming now the keys to the castle. Like if you're getting text message to that device to unlock payments, and someone gets into your bank account and needs that device to unlock payments, then they're going to take that device, use that text message, transfer $50,000 and it's gone.
All right. That's been, I think, a pretty good session, and hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. Blue Apache have they've sponsored was it a Google Mini, which is probably in theme with the artificial intelligence.
You book a haircut.
As a door prize. So Michael, would you like to pick the winner for? Stone and Wood Private Limited, Paul Woods. There you go. Have fun talking to Google. Thanks everybody for coming along today. I hope you got a lot out of it. Next month we're having another seminar I think we call it Embracing Drone Technology, so where things are happening there as well. So hopefully you got a lot out of today and look forward to seeing you guys next month. Thanks. Sorry, one quick thing. If you guys do have any questions around cyber security from a risk mitigation point of view, you've got Vincent here who's happy to take any questions, and Yvonne up the back on risk mitigation from through insurance point of view. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was meant to hand out the little prizes for the guys. Thanks for your time, Michael. Thank you so much. You're gonna have to broken one. Jeff gets the broken bottle. Yeah.